Emily had spent years believing that life only changed for other people. Every morning began before sunrise. Every dollar had a purpose, and every decision revolved around giving her young son a stable future. Yet as she walked out of the downtown office building that afternoon, she could not ignore the strange feeling that something had shifted. The meeting had lasted less than 30 minutes, but the conversation kept replaying in her mind. Daniel Carter, the well-known chief executive officer whose name appeared in business magazines and television interviews, had spoken to her with a level of respect she rarely received from anyone. He had not looked at her worn handbag or the old sedan waiting in the parking garage. He had looked directly at her and listened. Back at her apartment, Emily placed a frozen dinner in the microwave while her son colored pictures at the kitchen table. The small apartment was clean but crowded, with toys tucked into corners and bills stacked neatly beside a coffee maker that had seen better days. Her phone buzzed. She assumed it was another payment reminder. Instead, an email notification appeared. It was from Carter Enterprises. Her heart skipped a beat. With nervous fingers, she opened the message. The company wanted her to return the next day for a second interview. Emily read the words 3 times before she believed them. Across the city, Daniel sat alone in his office overlooking the skyline. Most executives had already gone home, but the lights remained on in his corner suite. He stared at Emily's application file on his desk. There had been dozens of candidates with stronger resumes and more impressive connections. Yet something about her stood out. She had answered every question honestly. She had not tried to impress anyone. In a world full of carefully rehearsed conversations, her authenticity felt rare. The next morning, Emily borrowed a blazer from a friend and arrived 30 minutes early. She sat quietly in the reception area, trying to calm her nerves. When Daniel stepped out of the elevator, he noticed her immediately. Most candidates spent their waiting time scrolling through their phones. Emily was reviewing. Notes written on a folded sheet of paper. Preparation mattered to him. Determination mattered even more. The interview felt different from the first one. Questions became conversations. Conversations became stories. Emily spoke about balancing work and motherhood, about learning resilience through hardship, and about refusing to let difficult circumstances define her future. Daniel listened carefully. For the first time in years, he found himself genuinely interested in someone beyond business results and quarterly reports. By the time the meeting ended, neither wanted to admit how quickly the hour had passed. As Emily stood to leave, Daniel surprised himself. He asked if she would be willing to attend a company charity event that weekend as a guest. It was a simple invitation, professional and harmless, yet it carried unexpected weight. Emily hesitated for a moment before agreeing. As she walked toward the elevator, she could not explain why her pulse was racing. And as the doors closed, Daniel remained standing in the conference room, watching the empty space where she had been, realizing that some opportunities arrive disguised as ordinary moments. The charity event took place on a Saturday evening at a waterfront hotel overlooking the city lights. Emily almost declined the invitation 3 separate times. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror earlier that afternoon, she questioned whether she belonged in a room filled with executives, investors, and community leaders. But her son had looked up from the living room couch and smiled. He told her she always encouraged him to be brave, so maybe it was her turn. Those words stayed with her during the entire drive downtown. When she arrived, the grand ballroom felt larger than any place she had visited in years. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished floors, and conversations floated through the air like background music. Emily adjusted the sleeve of her borrowed dress and quietly stepped inside. Almost immediately, she noticed Daniel across the room. He was speaking with a group of guests, but when he saw her, his attention shifted. To Emily's surprise, he excused himself and walked directly toward her. His smile was genuine, not the polished expression she had seen in magazine photographs. He thanked her for coming and introduced her to several people, as if she were already an important part of the evening. The gesture eased some of her nervousness. Throughout the event, Emily learned more about the company and the charitable programs it supported. She listened to stories about scholarships, housing assistance, and mentorship opportunities for families facing difficult circumstances. The work resonated deeply with her because she understood those struggles firsthand. Daniel noticed the way she connected with people. She never tried to dominate a conversation or draw attention to herself. Instead, she listened carefully and made others feel heard. As the evening continued, several guests assumed she had known Daniel for years because of how naturally they interacted. Neither corrected them. Later, while standing near the outdoor terrace overlooking the river, Emily found herself alone with Daniel for the first time that night. The city skyline stretched across the horizon, glowing beneath the dark sky. For a few moments, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Daniel finally admitted that he rarely enjoyed events like this anymore. Emily laughed softly and confessed that she had spent most of the week worrying she would say something embarrassing. The honesty made them both smile. For the first time, the distance between a struggling single mother and a successful chief executive officer seemed smaller than either had imagined. Yet neither ignored the reality of their different worlds. As the event came to an end, Daniel walked her to the parking area. Before she left, he informed her that the company had reached a decision regarding the position. Emily's stomach tightened instantly. She prepared herself for disappointment. Instead, Daniel handed her a sealed envelope and told her to open it when she got home. The drive back felt longer than usual. When she finally entered her apartment, her son was already asleep. Sitting alone at the kitchen table beneath a dim light, Emily carefully opened the envelope. As her eyes moved across the first line, tears gathered unexpectedly. She had been offered the job. Emily stared at the letter for several seconds before the words fully registered. She had been offered the position. Not a temporary contract. Not a trial assignment. A real job with benefits, opportunities for advancement, and a salary that would finally allow her to breathe without constant financial pressure. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she covered her mouth to keep from waking her son. For years, she had carried the weight of uncertainty alone. Now, for the first time in a very long time, the future looked different. The following Monday marked the beginning of a new chapter. Emily arrived at Carter Enterprises nearly 40 minutes early, determined to make a strong impression. The building that once felt intimidating now felt filled with possibility. She was greeted by friendly coworkers, shown to her workspace, and introduced to her team. Although she still felt nervous, she quickly realized that she belonged there. Her attention to detail, strong work ethic, and ability to solve problems earned respect faster than she expected. Across the office, Daniel observed quietly. He never gave her special treatment. In fact, he was often more careful with her than anyone else because he did not want others to think her success was connected to him. Yet he could not ignore how often their paths crossed. Team meetings became conversations. Conversations became moments they both looked forward to. Weeks passed, and Emily's confidence continued to grow. At home, life improved as well. Bills were paid on time. The refrigerator stayed full. Her son noticed the difference immediately. One evening, while helping him with homework at the kitchen table, he smiled and told her she seemed happier lately. The simple observation stayed with her long after he went to bed. Meanwhile, Daniel found himself thinking about Emily far more than he intended. He admired her resilience, but it was her kindness that affected him most. Despite everything she had endured, she remained optimistic. She celebrated other people's successes. She treated everyone with respect. Those qualities were rare in any environment, especially one as competitive as corporate leadership. One afternoon, the company organized a volunteer event at a local community center. Employees spent the day helping families and supporting educational programs for children. Emily brought her son along. Daniel arrived later and immediately noticed the young boy enthusiastically participating in every activity. When Emily introduced them, Daniel knelt to shake his hand. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but something about the interaction felt unexpectedly meaningful. Watching them together, Emily saw a side of Daniel that never appeared in business articles or executive interviews. He was patient, warm, and genuinely interested in people. As the event ended, the three of them walked toward the parking lot beneath the golden light of the setting sun. Her son chatted happily beside them, completely unaware of the emotions quietly developing between the two adults. Neither Emily nor Daniel spoke about those feelings. The timing was not right, and both understood the complications. Yet as they exchanged a final smile before leaving, they shared the same realization. What had begun as a job opportunity was slowly becoming something neither of them had expected. The weeks that followed brought a sense of stability Emily had almost forgotten was possible. Each morning, she drove to work with purpose, and each evening she returned home with enough energy to be fully present for her son. The constant anxiety that had once followed her everywhere began to fade. At Carter Enterprises, her contributions continued to earn recognition. She approached every assignment with determination, and people quickly learned they could rely on her. What Emily did not realize was how often Daniel noticed the difference she was making throughout the company. During leadership meetings, department managers frequently mentioned her ideas and professionalism. Daniel listened carefully, feeling proud of a decision that had originally been based on instinct rather than credentials alone. One afternoon, Emily received unexpected news. A senior manager informed her that she had been selected to lead an important community outreach project sponsored by the company. The opportunity would place her in front of local leaders, nonprofit organizations, and business partners. Her first reaction was doubt. She had never imagined herself in a leadership role. Yet when she shared her concerns with Daniel during a meeting later that day, his response surprised her. He told her that confidence was not something people were born with. It was something they built through experience. He reminded her that every accomplishment in her life had started with uncertainty. The conversation stayed with Emily long after she returned to her desk. As preparations for the project continued, she found herself spending more time with Daniel. Most of their discussions focused on work, but occasionally the conversation drifted into personal territory. They talked about childhood memories, favorite books, and the challenges that shaped them into who they had become. Emily learned that Daniel's success had come with sacrifices few people understood. Despite his wealth and accomplishments, there had been periods of loneliness that no amount of professional achievement could erase. Daniel learned that Emily possessed a quiet strength that inspired everyone around her, even when she did not recognize it herself. Their connection deepened naturally, built on mutual respect rather than grand gestures. Meanwhile, Emily's son continued to thrive. His grades improved, and his cheerful personality filled their apartment with warmth. One evening, after hearing Emily mention Daniel's name several times while discussing work, he smiled mischievously and asked whether her boss was also her friend. The question caught her off guard. She laughed and changed the subject, but later, as she sat alone with a cup of tea, she realized she could no longer deny the importance Daniel had begun to hold in her life. A few days later, after a successful presentation for the outreach project, Daniel asked if she would join him for dinner to celebrate the achievement. He made it clear there was no business agenda attached to the invitation. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The air between them seemed filled with possibilities. Emily felt her heart beat a little faster. Daniel waited patiently, giving her space to decide. Then a small smile appeared on her face. For the first time since their paths had crossed, both understood that the next step might change everything. Emily accepted the invitation, but the moment she said yes, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty settled into her heart. For weeks, she had carefully separated her professional life from her personal feelings. Now that line suddenly felt less clear. The dinner was scheduled for Friday evening at a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. It was elegant without being overwhelming, a place chosen for conversation rather than attention. Throughout the week, Emily found herself thinking about it more often than she wanted to admit. At work, she remained focused, determined not to allow her emotions to affect her performance. Yet every time she crossed paths with Daniel, she noticed a subtle change in the way he smiled at her. When Friday finally arrived, Emily spent extra time getting ready after work. Nothing extravagant. She simply wanted to feel confident. Before leaving, she checked on her son, who was happily spending the evening with a trusted friend. As she drove toward the restaurant, she reminded herself that this was only dinner. Still, her pulse quickened when she spotted Daniel waiting near the entrance. The evening unfolded naturally. There was no discussion of company reports or business strategies. Instead, they talked about life. Emily shared stories about becoming a mother at a young age and the challenges she had faced building a future with limited resources. Daniel listened carefully, never interrupting, never offering empty sympathy. He respected her journey because he understood the strength it required. In return, Daniel spoke about the pressure that came with success. Many people admired the results, but few understood the responsibility behind them. He admitted that genuine friendships had become rare. Trust was difficult when people often saw his title before they saw him as a person. Emily understood more than he expected. As the hours passed, Both realized how comfortable they felt together. There was no need to impress one another. The conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from serious reflections to laughter and shared memories. For the first time in years, Daniel felt completely at ease. For the first time in even longer, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future that included more than survival. When dinner ended, they walked slowly along the riverfront. The city lights reflected across the water while a cool evening breeze moved through the air. Neither wanted the night to end too quickly. Eventually, Daniel stopped and looked at her with complete sincerity. He told her that meeting her had changed something in his life. Not because of what she did for the company, but because of who she was. Emily felt emotion rise in her chest. No grand speech could have meant more than those simple words. As they said goodnight, nothing dramatic happened. There were no promises and no rushed decisions. Yet both understood that a new chapter had quietly begun. What started as an unexpected opportunity had become a connection built on trust, respect, and something deeper that neither could ignore any longer. As Emily drove home beneath the glow of the streetlights, she smiled to herself, realizing that sometimes the most meaningful changes arrive when you finally stop expecting them. The days after their dinner carried a quiet sense of anticipation. Nothing about Emily and Daniel's routine changed on the surface, yet everything felt different beneath it. They continued to approach their work with professionalism, careful not to blur boundaries inside the office. Even so, small moments began to mean more than either expected. A shared smile during a meeting, a brief conversation in the hallway, or a message congratulating each other on a successful project carried a warmth that had not existed before. Emily found herself looking forward to each day in a way she never had. For years, her focus had been survival. Now she was building a life. Her career was growing. Her son was thriving. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that happiness did not have to be temporary. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel accepted an invitation to join Emily and her son at a community festival sponsored by local businesses. The event was simple, filled with families, food trucks, music, and activities for children. It was far removed from the formal corporate events they usually attended. Daniel arrived dressed casually, attracting far less attention than he normally would. Emily's son immediately greeted him with excitement and pulled him toward a basketball challenge near the center of the park. To Emily's amusement, Daniel accepted the challenge without hesitation. The two spent nearly 20 minutes laughing and competing while Emily watched from a nearby bench. Seeing them together filled her with unexpected emotion. Daniel was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply enjoying himself. More importantly, he treated her son with genuine kindness and respect. Throughout the afternoon, the three of them moved naturally from one activity to another. At one point, they shared lunch beneath a shaded pavilion while listening to a local band perform. Emily realized that for the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. There was no pressure, no financial fear, and no uncertainty about where she belonged. As the sun began to set, they walked toward the parking area together. Her son chatted nonstop about the games they had played and the prizes he had won. Eventually, he climbed into the back seat of Emily's car and quickly became distracted by a new toy. For a brief moment, Emily and Daniel stood alone beside the vehicle. Neither spoke immediately. The comfortable silence said more than words could. Daniel finally admitted that the day had been one of the happiest he could remember. Emily smiled softly and confessed that she felt the same. Their eyes met, and for a moment the busy world around them seemed to disappear. There was still uncertainty ahead. They knew relationships required patience, trust, and time. Yet both understood something important. What connected them was no longer based on circumstances, career opportunities, or chance encounters. It was built on genuine friendship, shared values, and mutual admiration. As Emily drove home that evening with her son asleep in the back seat, she glanced at the road ahead and felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. She felt excited about the future instead of afraid of it. As autumn settled over the city, life continued moving forward in ways that felt both exciting and unfamiliar. Emily's outreach project had become one of the company's most successful community initiatives, earning praise from local leaders and employees alike. Yet the achievement that mattered most to her was not the recognition. It was the confidence she had gained along the way. She no longer saw herself as someone struggling to keep up with life. She had become someone actively shaping her future. Daniel noticed the transformation as clearly as anyone. During meetings, Emily spoke with assurance. She shared ideas without hesitation and handled challenges with remarkable composure. Watching her growth filled him with admiration. More than once, he found himself reflecting on how different his life felt since she had entered it. Success had once been measured by numbers, acquisitions, and expansion plans. Now he found equal value in meaningful conversations, shared laughter, and the simple joy of spending time with people who genuinely cared about one another. One evening, Emily and her son attended a company family gathering hosted at a lakeside park. Employees brought relatives, children played games on the grass, and food was served from outdoor stands. The atmosphere felt relaxed and welcoming. As the event unfolded, Emily noticed how naturally Daniel interacted with everyone around him. Despite his position, he treated every person with the same respect. Her son, meanwhile, seemed determined to include Daniel in every activity available. By the end of the afternoon, they had participated in a relay race, a trivia contest, and even a friendly pie baking competition judged by local volunteers. The laughter they shared created memories that stayed with all three of them long after the event ended. Later, as the crowd gradually dispersed and the sun lowered toward the horizon, Emily and Daniel found themselves walking beside the lake. The water reflected shades of gold and orange while a cool breeze moved across the surface. For a few moments, neither spoke. They simply enjoyed the peaceful setting. Eventually, Daniel admitted that he had spent years believing he had everything he needed. He had achieved goals most people only dreamed about, yet something had always been missing. Emily listened quietly as he explained that meeting her had changed his perspective. She had reminded him that fulfillment came from connection, not accomplishments. His honesty touched her deeply. Emily then shared a truth of her own. She told him that before joining the company, she had stopped believing life could surprise her in positive ways. She had become so focused on responsibility that she forgot how to hope. The silence that followed felt meaningful rather than uncomfortable. Both understood they were sharing pieces of themselves few others ever saw. As they reached the end of the path, Daniel gently took her hand. There was nothing rushed about the moment. It felt natural, as though it had been leading there all along. Emily smiled, and for the first time neither of them questioned where their journey was heading. The future remained unwritten, but they were no longer facing it alone. The weeks that followed brought a quiet sense of certainty to Emily's life. There was no dramatic announcement and no sudden change that everyone around them could see. Instead, the relationship between her and Daniel continued to grow through everyday moments. They learned each other's routines, celebrated small victories, and supported one another through challenges that appeared along the way. For Emily, the greatest surprise was how natural everything felt. She had spent years carrying responsibilities alone. Accepting help had always been difficult. Yet Daniel never tried to solve her problems for her. He simply stood beside her, offering encouragement whenever she needed it. That difference meant more than he realized. At work, Emily's success continued to attract attention. Her community outreach program expanded into neighboring counties, creating opportunities for hundreds of families. Company leaders praised her vision and leadership. More importantly, the families she helped often shared stories about the positive changes taking place in their lives. Those stories reminded Emily why she worked so hard. One afternoon, she received a letter from a local nonprofit organization recognizing her contributions to the community. As she read the words, she thought back to the woman who had once worried about paying bills and keeping food on the table. The contrast felt almost unbelievable. That evening, she shared the news with Daniel and her son during dinner. Her son immediately jumped from his chair and wrapped his arms around her. Daniel smiled as he watched the moment unfold. He understood that the recognition represented far more than professional success. It symbolized how far she had come. As winter approached, the city transformed with holiday decorations and festive lights. Carter Enterprises organized its annual holiday celebration, an event attended by employees, community partners, and local leaders. Unlike previous years, Daniel found himself looking forward to the gathering. This time, he would not be attending alone. When Emily arrived that evening, she carried herself with a confidence that reflected the journey she had completed. Conversations followed her wherever she went. People respected her achievements and admired her character. Throughout the event, Daniel watched her interact with guests from every background imaginable. She made each person feel important. That quality had never changed, no matter how much her circumstances improved. Later in the evening, awards were presented recognizing employees who had made exceptional contributions during the year. When Emily's name was announced, the room erupted into applause. She walked to the stage with visible emotion and accepted the award with gratitude. During her brief remarks, she thanked her colleagues, the community partners, and the people who had believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. Her eyes briefly met Daniel's across the room. No further explanation was necessary. He understood exactly what she meant. As the evening came to a close, they stepped outside into the crisp winter air. Snowflakes drifted gently beneath the glow of nearby streetlights. Standing together, they reflected on everything that had changed over the past year. Neither of them could have predicted where a simple job interview would lead. Yet both knew one thing with complete certainty. The most important chapters of their story were no longer behind them. They were waiting just ahead, ready to be written together.